Welcome to the Sage Solutions podcast, where we talk about all things personal growth, personal development, and becoming your best self. My name is David Sage, and I'm a self-worth and confidence coach with Sage Coaching Solutions. On this podcast, Hannah, and I spend a lot of time talking about what actually moves the needle when it comes to personal development. However, the internet is absolutely flooded with life hacks. You see them everywhere. People promising you can optimize every second of your day with a new morning routine or this life-changing productivity system. And if we're being honest, a massive percentage of these hacks are really gimmicky, and some of them are actively detrimental. They demand that you adopt a 14-step routine before the sun even comes up. They create a rigid structure that falls apart the second real life happens. You end up feeling like you failed at your morning, and the stress carries through your entire day. Today, we're going to strip all of that away. I want to talk about 5 practical adjustments that actually work. Now, you could call these life hacks. However, that doesn't mean that everything that's considered a life hack is bad or gimmicky or useless. There are definitely some diamonds in the rough. So today we're going to strip all of that gimmick away because I'm going to talk about 5 powerful life hacks that are practical adjustments that actually work. These are small changes that respect you as a human. They help you build genuine momentum. We'll look at what they are, why they make a positive impact, and how you can implement them when you feel the resistance. But before we get into it, our goal with this podcast is to share free, helpful tools with you and anyone you know who is looking to improve their life. So take action, subscribe, and share this podcast with them. Let's start with the first one. It comes straight out of the kitchen. Now, some of you may know I went to culinary school, and that's actually where I first met my wife, Hannah. And she has a whole history in the culinary arts. She was an executive chef, and this is one of the fundamentals that we learned. In the culinary world, there's a concept called mise en place. I don't know if it translates exactly, but it's French, and it essentially means to put everything in its place. You gather your ingredients, your knives, and your prep bowls before you even turn a stove on. And full mise en place often starts with chopping things up ahead of time so that you're not doing it while having to keep an eye on how something else is cooking. Mise en place tends to move into prep, which is getting things chopped up or set up before you start doing the time-sensitive parts of a recipe. But having all of the utensils and ingredients and surfaces that you're going to need ready before you start is going to save you tons of time looking for things in the middle of making a recipe. Mise en place was an absolute game changer for me when it came to cooking. And this same ideology of putting everything in its place, of environmental design, of mise en place, has a profoundly positive impact on your life outside of the kitchen. Decision fatigue is real. When you have to figure out what you need in the exact moment that you need to do the work, you're burning energy. Organizing your environment beforehand removes the cognitive load. That way, when you sit down to work, you just work. When you need to do a task like building something, you already have all of the tools. You can mise en place so many things in your life. It's not just for the kitchen. One of the major ways to implement this only requires a very small time investment the night before. You prepare your physical space for the next activity. If you plan to take your dog out on a trail near the apartment in the morning, you put the leash and your shoes right by the door. And what you're effectively doing here by mise en placing is you are reducing the friction. You're making it as frictionless as possible for you to do the thing that you want to do. If you have a big project at work, you close all the random tabs on your computer and open only the document that you need. You clear the friction away in advance. The action becomes the easiest choice available when you set yourself up for success with mise en place. Now, this second hack is actually a practice that I originally heard from someone else. And this is not the first time that we've brought it up on the podcast. The second hack is the 5-second rule by Mel Robbins. The concept is incredibly straightforward. The moment you have an instinct to take a positive action, as soon as you possibly can, count backwards like the takeoff of a rocket ship. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you immediately move, physically move. If you catch yourself starting to talk yourself out of it, interrupt that thought by saying 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then go. Our brains are very good at protecting us from things that feel uncomfortable or uncertain. If you give yourself too much time to think about a difficult task, your mind will find a perfectly logical reason to avoid it. And even if you can overcome it, you're spending a bunch of mental cognitive load arguing with your own brain about something you know you should be doing. The 5-second rule dramatically reduces the tax on our willpower that comes from arguing with ourselves in our head. Counting backwards specifically interrupts that hesitation pattern. Because it's harder to count backwards than forwards, it makes it very, very hard to talk yourself out of something while counting backwards. Backwards countdown requires your brain to shift from resting on comfortable habits to taking deliberate action. You start building a bridge between knowing what you want to do and actually doing it. You can start using this today with the smallest actions possible. It's the ultimate hack for overcoming activation energy, for getting yourself to take the minimum viable action. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. When you hear your alarm in the morning, count down from 5, and right after 1, launch up and put your feet on the floor. You know you need to have a challenging conversation. You count down and make that phone call. You bypass the internal debate entirely. You're simply teaching yourself that your commitments matter more than your temporary hesitation. Hack number 3 is the mental offload. I think a lot of us do this thing where we try to keep our entire to-do list floating in our short-term memory. I know I do. And frankly, just repeating it over and over in your head like that isn't really helping. We're going to call this one the mental offload. It's the practice of getting all of these floating thoughts out of your head and onto a physical piece of paper, or even on a notes app in your phone. Our brains are wonderful at processing information. They are terrible at holding on to multiple loose threads. Trying to remember everything creates a constant hum of quiet anxiety. You're opening so many tabs that it's overloading your processor. The positive impact here is immediate clarity. You're freeing up cognitive bandwidth. When you're no longer spending energy trying to remember what you need to do, you can actually use that energy to do the things, to do the work. It takes the abstract overwhelm of your responsibilities and turns them into a concrete list that you can actually look at. This also helps you not forget things that you need to do. So to put this into practice, just take 5 minutes at the end of your day or the end of the week or any other time that just makes sense and just write it all down. Write down the emails you need to send, the groceries you need to buy, and the conversations that you're avoiding. Get it out of your head. Getting it out of your head lets you look at the reality of the situation and decide what actually matters. Sometimes the most honest next step is small, boring, and very real. Our 4th hack is the 5-minute limit. Getting started is almost always the hardest part of any task. And if you have ADHD like me, it's even worse. Initiating an action can feel like climbing a wall. That's why, in a small way, this hack gamifies the process. Now, I personally love playing board games, or really any strategy game, like a card game or a video game. I love analyzing the different builds and figuring out the different strategies in games. This hack treats the very first step of a task like a low-stakes game mechanic. And it really does help because action creates inertia. So what is it? The 5-minute limit is getting yourself to start on a task by giving yourself permission to quit at the 5-minute mark. Now, you're not always going to want to use this one. But frankly, if it's going to get you to start, you will most likely continue. But you have permission not to, which removes a lot of the pressure and friction preventing you from starting. You bypass the overwhelming feeling of the entire project by shrinking the requirement down to a tiny window of time. Implementing this is straightforward. You give yourself full permission to quit after that 5 minutes. You sit down to write an email, or you start paying your bills, and you commit to doing it for exactly 300 seconds. You set a timer. Once the initial friction of starting is gone, you almost always end up continuing, but you're allowed to stop. The hardest part was just crossing that starting line and taking the minimum viable action. So if something feels like it's overwhelming to start, you can use the 5-minute limit to take off the pressure, and then the 5-second rule to actually start. Our final life hack is the values anchor. This means using your core values as a definitive filter for your decisions. Hannah and I recently sat down and used the Portrait Values questionnaire to get completely clear on our personal values hierarchies. We mapped out exactly what matters most to us. This has a powerful impact because it eliminates decision fatigue. Saying no becomes incredibly simple when you know exactly what you care about. Your self-worth deepens when your actions match your values. You stop living by external expectations and start living by what matters to you. You can overcome the friction of people-pleasing by identifying your top 2 or 3 personal values. Keep them written down on your desk or in your phone. When an opportunity or request comes your way, you run it through that filter. Does this commitment support my top values? If it causes a conflict with the things that you hold most important, you pass on the opportunity. Now look, I'm going to be shades of gray here and say, you don't have to do this all the time. There are going to be times where the thing might have nothing to do with your values. But if you're struggling to decide, this is a really great way to see if it's aligned with what you care about. When it conflicts with your values, the decision is already made by the values that you established, protecting you from decision fatigue. These 5 practices are simple, but they require a little bit of intention. Knowing them is great, but they really don't mean much if you never use them. And most importantly, they respect your humanity. They treat you like a person, and they work. I think one of the harder parts of personal growth is realizing that you can understand why you do something and still be responsible for practicing something different. Growth is what happens when insight becomes practice. So go try these out. See what works for your life and keep moving forward. And remember, you are enough, and you deserve to fill up your inner cup with happiness, true confidence, and resilience. Thank you for listening to the Sage Solutions podcast. Your time is valuable, and I'm so glad you choose to learn and grow here with me. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on more sage advice. One last thing, the legal language. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. No coaching-client relationship is formed. It is not intended as a substitute for the personalized advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional.